Alright everybody, today we're going to be looking at the long-anticipated fight between Errol the Truth Spence Jr. and Terence Bud Crawford, who each have a combined professional boxing record of 67 victories with no defeats. Somebody's O has got to go, but we're going to break this down into chapters, and Chapter 1 is going to focus on each fighter's use of the jab and how it sets up their other combinations. You'll see here against the opposite stance fighter in Kell Brook, he touches the jab fighting the lead hand battle and fakes it to the body. Then as Brook steps in, he comes over the top with a lead jab, but it's more of a check hook hybrid, and he bangs Brook right on the chin and rocks him, leading up to a knockdown. Crawford likes to use the jab to occupy the opponent's high guard. You'll see it there as he goes with a left straight to the body, then a left hook to a right hook to a left uppercut. By occupying the opponent with the jab against the opposite stance fighter, he's able to manipulate the high guard and open up the body since the guard is up high. Then he can touch back and land some more combinations by mixing it up low-high or high-low. Being southpaw against an opposite stance fighter, the jab is usually used to get the outside foot and set up the trajectory for the back power left hand, or potential shots to the body, as you see there, and then he can use the jab again to back out of range. In being a southpaw, stepping the lead right foot to the outside of the lead left foot of the orthodox fighter can set up the power and pathway for a power uppercut, straight, or overhand. The jab is used to get the outside foot on the orthodox fighter, and then he can come back with a pull counter left straight, and then double it up or triple it up with an overhand left as the opponent switches to the same stance. The jab hand can also be switched to a check left hook to get the outside foot and pivot off against an orthodox fighter, as you see there against Porter, as he uses the check hook to pivot and go back to the center off the ropes. Watch here as Crawford uses the jab to step to the outside and then land a 4-3-5-2 and pivot off, forcing the opponent to step off with the pivot and turn into Crawford, forcing the reset. The jab here is used to maintain distance and range and also control the target. He's then able to slip inside the jab of the opponent, come back with an overhand right, then step to southpaw and land a vicious left hook off the stance switch to drop Amir Khan. Here's an example of the rear side angle off the slip inside the jab of Amir Khan to counter with the right hand. He steps to the rear side angle and briefly squares up his stance and switches to southpaw to land the left hook while Amir Khan is perpendicular to Crawford. Spence's use of the jab is more based on a showcase of multi-shot volume combinations. He landed a jab there, then pulled, then landed another jab to go into a multitude of left and right hooks, and then uppercuts and shots to the body. The jab of Spence here is used to maintain the distance and range as he's able to fire off counter crosses and slip the potential straight left counter of the opponent. He can mix it up between straights, hooks, and uppercuts to the head or the body, but mainly is able to maintain the exact range he needs to be able to avoid almost all the counters that the opponent throws back either to the head or body. Here we'll see him use the jab to enter into range, then frame off in the 50-50 position and be able to land a counter left hook against Porter, who's a common opponent of Crawford as well. Outside foot positioning is again showcased here as he gets the outside foot on the orthodox opponent and is able to use the jab to dictate the range and land the left straight to the body. He'll then double jab there, land a left straight, and use that for the hip torque and turnover into another vicious body shot. Here you'll see the jab enter Errol Spence into one of his most effective positions, which is framing off or getting into the 50-50. You'll see here as he's able to use the jab to enter and then frame off with the lead right forearm and land a vicious left uppercut to the body. We'll touch on this more later on in the breakdown. Using the jab against an opposite stance fighter can eventually set up the left straight to the body if you're in southpaw, but here he lands the straight left to the body, but the opponent's able to track it and follow up with their own rear cross as the opponent brings the backhand back to their chin. This is a perfect example of what the rear side angle can do against an opposite stanced opponent, not just an equal stanced opponent. We're now going to move on to Chapter 2, which is going to encompass the rear hand success of Terence Bud Crawford. You'll see here Crawford's in an orthodox stance, primarily fighting out of the southpaw stance for most of his career, but he's able to land the overhand right over the lead jab of the same stance fighter because when you're both orthodox, you each have a jab and a right hand. When it's orthodox versus southpaw, it's going to be more usage of the check hooks than the jabs or crosses to set up the outside angle for the power backhand like we've touched on already. Here Crawford's going to double up the rear hand with a 2-pull-2 to avoid and come over the jab or lead hook of the same stance fighter and trap the opponent in the corner where he can go off with a barrage of punches and set up his elite inside fighting game. Here you'll see Crawford fighting an orthodox fighter as a southpaw. He lands the jab, avoids the power backhand, and then steps to the rear side angle to eventually set up a power left cross off that rear side angle, which you see there in slow motion. Stepping to the rear side, measuring, and being able to crack the opponent on the jaw as he's perpendicular on that correct angle. Here, Crawford's going to get that outside foot advantage with the jab and then the check hook, and then set his feet to land a good left straight with maximum power as he's on a good angle, catching the opponent stepping in and trying to land his backhand. Watch the left cross beat the right cross of the orthodox fighter as Crawford squares up his stance for maximum power and then is able to come back with a lead hook on the counter as well. Crawford can also double up the rear hand if he's able to get that outside foot on the orthodox fighter by throwing multiple straight left hands if he's on the correct angle. This can also be achieved with getting that check hook. But another thing that Crawford likes to do is mix up the jab and cross by throwing it in the reverse order. Going 2-1 or lunging in with the cross and following up with the jab almost makes the jab a type of check hook on an opposite stance fighter, or a very powerful check hook or lead hook on the same stanced opponent. In going 2-1, you're also lunging in with the lead hand and squaring up your hips for maximum power from either the left or right side. So that lunging jab off the lunging cross instead of a 1-2 going 2-1, you're actually aiding in the power that you're able to generate with that lead hand off that brief switch from the 2-1. It looks as if Crawford was trying to establish the 2-1 here, but he was able to land that left hand flush and then move off to the rear side angle and use the lead hand as a frame instead of a jab. Crawford is fundamentally sound, although he does look reckless at some points. You'll see him there go with a 1-2-3 and then be able to high guard to avoid the barrage from the opponent and then come over the lead hook with an overhand right as he slips inside the lead hand and comes over the top, dropping the opponent. Outside foot southpaw versus orthodox, and there's the 2, then lunging in with the 1 off the square of the stance, but using it to get the outside foot and land the straight left right down the center. We touched on the jab uses of Crawford earlier, but here you'll see him use the jab to get the outside foot and then come in with the straight left on the correct angle and follow up with a pause into a lead hook, even though it could be considered a jab at certain points, and into a barrage that causes the fight to be stopped. This is more of a counter off the back foot against the same stance southpaw fighter as the opponent lunges in with a 1-2, but Crawford's able to step back, square up his hips briefly, and land a lead hook to get an outside foot positioning, or at least get that outside angle, and then land a vicious left hook to the body. Very good backstep counter there from Crawford. Crawford has so much natural power that he can land knockout punches from either southpaw or orthodox as he backs up, but this combination here is similar to what we've been talking about with that backstep counter, but instead of a rear punch, it's a lead uppercut that catches the opponent. The jab is used to measure as Porter tries to land an overhand right, but it's faded away. Then Crawford's going to pull back with a pull counter and land a beautiful straight left hand on that outside foot positioning angle. Quick sit on the rear foot to avoid the lead hook and fire the straight left on a beautiful outside angle. Spence is an inside fighter. Most of his success relies primarily on getting into the 50-50 position and fighting from a close range. However, Spence is able to adjust and get angles off peeling the opponent's high guards, peeling their head using the forearm for frames, and being able to adjust on the inside and adjust in order to get the outside angles that he needs to deliver power in the backhand. That could include manipulating the opponent's guard or forcing off with the head and peeling the head to move over to the rear side to find the correct angle to land the power shot. Here's an example of Spence using the frames in order to throw a right hook from the orthodox stance, switching into southpaw, and then adjusting with an angle shift to shift off to the rear side in the southpaw stance to be able to adjust and land power in the opposite stance as well. When Errol Spence is able to get you up against the ropes, it's going to be a barrage of hooks and uppercuts and use of the 50-50 position to butcher your head and your body. Going to be right hooks from the lead side, left hooks from the rear side, and an ability to measure with the jab and come up the middle with uppercuts using the elbow manipulation, guard manipulation, and frames that we touched on earlier in the video. Spence plays a touch-rip style of game. You see him measure there with the jab, pushing the opponent up against the ropes, and then ripping with the rear left hook to the body and coming back with the lead hook. The jab allows Spence to go into range for his rear back power cross, but the back power cross can also be adjusted and used to push off, frame, manipulate the opponent's guard, and then go with the uppercuts and hooks to the body, such as the 4-3 or the 6 to the 5. Errol Spence Jr. uses the 50-50 position better than almost anybody in boxing. He can use the lead hooks, rear hooks, straight punches, and rear uppercuts to the body in order to get the outside foot positioning on an orthodox fighter, and also walk himself into range and potentially switch stances to mix up the power and trajectory of the shots so the opponent doesn't know where they're coming from. Spence is going to land the lead hook into the rear uppercut, then use that to shift off to the rear side angle and follow up with a power rear hook, lead hook, rear hook, then use the straight punch from the southpaw stance and use the left cross to shift forward into the orthodox stance and continue his combinations, shifting to southpaw all in the same instance. Touching on the MMA side of the game, the shift stance left cross into the overhand right was made famous by a mixed martial artist and former interim lightweight champion in Dustin the Diamond Poirier, who was one of the first fighters to adjust the southpaw shift stance combo into orthodox for a power right hand. When Spence gets you up against the ropes, you're in trouble with hooks to the body from the rear and lead side and uppercuts right up the middle. But watch here as Spence actually takes a step back in order to get the appropriate angle to step to the outside of the lead foot and deliver a rear uppercut to the body and follow up with a multitude of more hooks and uppercuts from the inside and the vicious inside game of Errol Spence. Whether in the 50-50 position or head-to-head, Spence Jr. likes to use the uppercuts in order to get the proper angle to land the maximum amount of torque into the body shots. He more often will go uppercut to hook instead of hook to uppercut, but if he does go hook to uppercut, it would most likely be a lead hook to the body followed up by a rear uppercut, or a rear hook to the body followed by a lead uppercut. Going head-to-head with an opponent in such close range forces them to adapt the high guard defense, which can allow for shots up the middle or around the side. You heard from Teddy Atlas knock on the front door and come around the side. And this is Spence's specialty, as he's able to use hooks to move into the rear side uppercuts or lead side, and he's able to use jabs and uppercuts from inside range to manipulate the high guard and be able to get maximum power with a barrage of violent shots and combinations. The jab to the body is going to lower the level of the opponent, allowing for the uppercut to be the best shot, and then that allows Spence to go in from the uppercut to the hook to the body and mix up with a barrage of hooks to the head, hooks to the body, and then uppercuts on the correct angles, including vicious body shots and shots up the middle to the head. Along with the high guard manipulation, using the uppercuts and hooks to the body and being so active from the inside game allows for Errol Spence to get the outside foot on the opposite stance fighter, like we've talked about so many times in the video, and also shift off to the rear side angles to potentially land hooks to the body from a better angle and then set up the rear side power shots to the head. Watch the rear side adjustments here. Off the hooks, he's able to adjust to the rear side angle to get maximum torque in the lead right hook to the body, and then use the lead hand frame and measure to get off to the rear side and land the power shot as the opponent circles away. In having such a hefty variety like Spence from the inside, it makes the opponent second guess what shots are coming. They don't know if it's a hook, uppercut, overhand, or an uppercut to the body or the head. It mixes up the type of shot and the trajectory of the punches, putting you at a disadvantage no matter who you are when you're going up against the truth, Errol Spence Jr. Crawford has a vicious inside game as well, but I would say he's not as technical or methodical as Spence from the inside game or the 50-50 position. It's more measuring and firing big power hooks, straights, and uppercuts, but he does sometimes have the methodical approach in being able to touch his way into range and then mix up the trajectory and timing of his shots by switching between softer punches to set up measures for big power explosive shots. Watch here as Crawford touches with the rear hand, then the lead hand to manipulate the opponent's high guard, then comes around the side with a left hook into a right hook, uses the frame or elbow guard to be able to move the opponent's head and find the targets for the big hooks and uppercuts. It's more hooks from Terence Crawford because he has so much natural power, but if he does get you backed up against the ropes, he has a keen ability to keep his back to the center of the ring and be able to fire off those combinations and eventually land a knockout blow. We've talked about Spence's ability to touch his way into range and switch up the tempo, and you'll see that here from Crawford as he touches with the jab and then fires explosive shots with a straight and elite uppercut, which eventually can set up the big power shot that drops the opponent. Watch here as in the midst of the combination, Crawford is going to fade off to the rear side angle off that lead hook to set up the proper trajectory for the power backhand, which can lead into more punches with a straight left and a right hook while the ref jumps in. Here you'll see a trifecta of lead hooks from Crawford to the head, to the body, and to the head or head, body, head, which eventually causes the referee to jump in. But the power and torque that he's able to generate in these lead hand punches is scary. And even if the technique isn't perfect, it's a big problem for Errol Spence if he finds himself on the receiving end of one of these vicious blows. We've touched on Crawford not being the cleanest technically, but he has such a natural gift in his power that he can square up his stance while moving backwards, and this is similar to the body shot drop we touched on earlier, as he's able to square up his stance and land a vicious left hook or left uppercut right to the body of the opponent. Touching on the outside foot positioning again, off the rear uppercut, he's able to land that straight left to the body, a lead right hook, and another straight left which misses, but he's able to achieve all of that by getting the outside foot on the orthodox fighter and using that to back the opponent up against the ropes. During this sequence, again, Shawn Porter, which starts off in the 50-50 position, off the left hook or uppercut to the body, he's able to land a 1-2, frame off, land a lead hook, then go back with another 1-2-3, and then a 2-3, while all keeping Porter at the exact range he needs to be out of the range of the power of the opponent and be in the range to land the shots that he needs to land. Similar principles are instilled here as well, as you see him backing Porter up against the ropes, but using the lead hand to measure for the straight left hand so he can roll under the rear right hook of Porter. Then off the counter left hook to the body, he's able to push Porter up against the ropes, use the backhand to measure and set up lead hooks to the head and the body. Here's another example of this principle as Crawford's able to use the lead jab to measure for 3 picture-perfect straight right crosses, then fire off a lead hook to the head or body, and move off to the rear side angle to set up the proper angle and trajectory for the power backhand again. And in wrapping this up, watch the rear side angle shift for Crawford to set up power in the lead uppercut off the proper angle, and then the lead hook can also be set up to get the outside foot and land a left cross if he wanted to follow up with a further combination.